pretty long PowerPoint, but we'll try and make it as simple as possible and try and help you define those program measures as best as possible. So, 1 second. There we go. All right. So just to give you a brief overview, the contents, we're going to start out just discussing the RBA, which is the results-based accountability framework. And this framework is what we generally use to define the performance measures that we want to see throughout the community. The next step, we're going to go over the actual posted funding priorities that we have. And that's pretty much the indicators that we look throughout the community to determine, whether we're trying to move, if we're looking at moving the needle, are we meeting those priorities? And then, of course, the last, we'll actually go into the actual program part. So pretty much your portion where we look at your program definitions and we talk about how to define those performance measures in the best way. So, and they meet within the RBA framework. So first and foremost, what is the results-based accountability? So results-based accountability is a planning and evaluation framework. It was developed by Mark Friedman and outlined in his book, Trying Hard is Not Hard Enough, or Trying Hard is Not Good Enough. And so basically what it is, we look at two different things. So we look at the population accountability, and that's the well-being of the whole population, the communities, the cities, counties, states, and nations. So that's the big picture of a population, right? And then we talk about the client population, and that's performance accountability. And when we're talking about client population, we're actually talking about the services that you provide. So your performance to the clients that you have. These two things work in they work with each other. So your performance accountability actually helps us look at the population accountability. So when we talk about the priorities, like it's going to help us determine whether we're moving the needle. Because like I said, at the beginning of this presentation, we're social analysis. So we look at the big population. We don't expect your agencies to try and determine how your service is actually moving that big number. Okay, who measures what? And this is what I was just talking about. So again, the whole population accountability, like I said, because it's a community-based indicator, because it's a community-based performance, that's really something that we measure on our part. We don't anticipate you being able to look at your services and then being able to determine, how you change that client population. We would like you to look at your client population and do your performance accountability. And again, that's the well-being of your clients. All right. So how does your service help your clients? Again, that one's going to feed into the bigger portion of everything else. So like I said, whole population is for us, and then client population is pretty much for your organization and your services or the programs that you're going to be providing for your clients. So next slide, talking about performance accountability. So each one of your services or each one of your agencies has programs, right? So your program accountability measures, so start on this side here. For your client population, you see you have program 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Those are actually going to be your services. Again, those lie within your own agency. Those aren't necessarily what we do. We will take your program services and we'll use it to help us understand the whole population. Now, when it comes to program accountability, as you see program 1, 2, 3, and 4, they all have to speak to certain measures. And what it is the effort. So when we talk about the effort, we're talking about the service delivery or services provided, the energy and the capacity that you put into actually delivering that service to your actual client. All right. And so the next measure that we talk about is the impact. How does that change? Like, what's the customer results? What is the outcome, the participant achievement? So if yours is to actually get clients to go to get a GED, things like that. Like, what is the outcome of that? What's the client from you actually giving them the service? And then did they actually achieve that? Good morning. Thank you. Okay. And so And that's pretty much how we go through all of that. And like I said, the RBA is just a framework for you to think about these things. Again, each one of your agencies has programs, and they're essentially the services that you're going to be providing to the community. We want to ensure that you capture your effort. What do you put into that program to get through everything? And then what's the outcome? After you delivered those services to the community, how did it turn out for your clients? And again, we'll use that information to pretty much inform us on how the rest of the population's doing. So thank you. And the next presenter is actually going to be Dr. Lara Serrano, and she'll actually go through the COSO funding priorities.
Thank you, Ronnie. Can everybody hear properly in-house and online? We are going to review the way the Department of Human Services determine the funding priorities. So the resources are limited, and we need to make sure that we address those urgent needs that, in our perspective, are more necessary at this time. The section that we're going to cover now, it is completely described in the RFP with a lot of detail. I'm going to try to break it down following the analysis that Ronnie Wilson shared with you. That idea of 2 levels of accountability, the performance accountability, that's the responsibility that you have once you implement a social service program, and it will have always in mind that larger reference of the population accountability. So for each funding priority in the document, in the RFP, you have a definition of what we call the background and the strategy. So the background is that information related to our department, the Department of Human Services, that describe how we have set that priority. And the strategy is how we plan to measure success in that specific area. Both things, the long-term outcomes and the priorities, fall under that bigger picture that Ronnie described, the population accountability. That population accountability that will be measured by the city of San Antonio. What you have to do once you describe your program is to be able to create performance metrics for your program within the program accountability, within that smaller circle. I really would like to ask you to interiorize the picture of the 2 circles. The larger circle is our community, right? The smaller circle, there might be many smaller circles, one for families, one for children, one for youth, right? That's where the different programs fall in. The city of San Antonio has, the Department of Human Services has 4 long-term outcomes, long-term community goals for the community. The first one is related to children and youth, and our goal is to have children and youth safe, healthy, and resilient, and ready to succeed in school and life. As you all see clearly, it is a broad, ambitious community goal, right? The Department of Human Services provides already services in these areas, and we are intentionally and strategically partnering with a partnership and many other community organizations to be aligned with the Future Ready Bejar County plan that many of you working in youth success might be familiar with. Programs funded under this big umbrella are expected to be part of that collective effort that will help us be more strategic and have a higher impact. So there is a clear expectation that grantees under this category will be part of that, will become partners under that collective impact. And we have prioritized, and you will see the description, certain school districts that, based on our analysis, have a higher need for services in certain areas. Edgewood, Harlandale, Northside, San Antonio ISD, and Southwest ISD. We will go through it whenever we dig into the different priorities. So under this long-term outcome number 1, children and youth are safe and resilient and they have everything that they need to succeed, the Department of Human Services has determined 4 priorities. And again, you have a very lengthy description, and I would say very clear, in my opinion, description from pages 4 to 6 in the RFP. Priority number 1 is to address child abuse. Priority number 2 is to promote college, career, and military readiness. Priority number 3 is kinder readiness. Priority number 4 has 2 strategies to promote youth success, but these are very focused on opportunity youth. We will get there. So long-term outcome number 1, children and youth. Priority number 1, child abuse prevention. Why this is important for the city of San Antonio? This is important for the city of San Antonio, and we want to continue funding programs that reduce the number of child abuse cases in San Antonio. We have access through a data sharing agreement to the San Antonio Police Department and the Texas Department of Family and Protected Services, and we have identified, that's why we have defined in a strategy, certain zip codes where there is a higher prevalence of child abuse. So that is our strategy. We would like to see a reduction in child abuse, at least in those areas, but overall, we want to address child abuse. So for you, when you define your program, let's get back to the idea of the circles, right? Those 2 blue areas, that is our community. That's where we define. Within the bigger picture of the community, the Department of Human Services wants to focus on children and youth. And within that, we invite you to look and provide program proposals to address child abuse in San Antonio. It is totally up to you to define the program. Program 1, 2, 3, those are your programs. Those are for you to define and elaborate. We invite you through the RFP to get a clear understanding of the comprehensive domestic violence plan that the city has in place. Probably you already know if you are working in this field, but for us it's very important to build collective strategies and try to be strategic. Some examples of programs that might be funded under this strategy: those programs that put emphasis on serving families of infants and toddlers and young children with or through parenting education, positive parenting programs, school-based prevention, trauma-informed care interventions, etc., etc. You have a lengthy descriptions of options. You probably know what you are already doing. We are just trying to give you some examples. Programs including case management should focus on prevention or reduction of child abuse and neglect by providing services meant to reduce the stressors that have been identified under many cases of child abuse: poverty, unemployment, underemployment, homelessness, parental separation, domestic violence, substance abuse, mental illness, right? So if you are thinking on a case on a program to address child abuse through case management, take into consideration that we will look at how are you planning to reduce those stressors that might be the root causes of the violence in home against children. And this will apply to every program. We would like to make sure that you have everything in place to measure and track how your program will impact directly our priority, that is to reduce child abuse in San Antonio. Long-term outcome number 1, we are still talking about children and youth. Priority number 2, the city of San Antonio is very committed to try to elevate the number of students that are college, career, or military ready to continue an educational pathway that might help them to have a better outcome in their own life. So what we would like to do, and we are already working in this area, is an increase in the number of high school graduates that are ready for the next step, that they don't finish high school and just leave to find the first job available, but that they are committed to continue their educational career. We plan to monitor these, looking at the percentage of graduates in certain school districts that have been assessed as CCR by the Texas Education Agency. And our internal goal is to see that at least 70% of all graduate students from those school districts, Edgewood, Harlandale, Northside, San Antonio, Southside, and Southwest, are ready for their next step. Let's see how this can affect you in your program definition. We are, again, I'm sorry if I'm very repetitive, but I really want to get this idea of the RBA very clear. The population accountability, the two blue circles are that community as a whole, children and youth in San Antonio, career, college, and military ready. And the green dots are you and your programs. Example of programs that might be funded under this priority are programs that might facilitate higher education, vocational and trade attainment, assistance with scholarships or finding scholarships or financial aid, college applications, college retention initiatives that might include some wraparound services, college retention, advice for alternative school students that might not be ready to go to college but might have other opportunities, career preparation, military preparation. We want to see that your proposals and your programs are meant to be a collaborative effort with the school district and also with the San Antonio Education Partnership. We need to make sure that you can measure the positive impact of your programs. And as stated before, the city is very committed to the Future Ready plan in collaboration with AD Partnership. Next priority under long-term outcome number 1. We are still talking about children and youth. And our priority number 3 is kinder readiness. So the city of San Antonio is already working in this area. And we would like to make sure that children in our community entering kindergarten are ready for success, ready to learn as much as possible, that they are assessed as kinder ready by the Texas Education Agency when they start their school pathway. The way we plan to measure these and track these is by assessing the number of children in 2 school districts that are the focus of our work as the Department of Human Services, San Antonio ISD, excuse me, and Edgewood ISD that attended the Texas Public Pre-K in the previous year that are ready for kindergarten. How these affect you, or how can this have a reflection on funded programs under this RFP? Within the children and youth long-term outcome, our kinder-ready priority will fund programs that are meant for early child development, like child development, parent engagement, parent education, parent and family support case management, health and mental wellness. For programs, if you are thinking on the programs that incorporate case management services, we want to make sure that you focus on activities that support children and parents' educational outcomes, right? That you can track the outcomes of that case management, which is sometimes complicated. And we would like to measure, again, and sorry for the repetitive around the measurement, but for us it's very important that you define a program that can have a clear outcome for us to track. And we would like to focus on 2 school districts, San Antonio ISD and Edgewood ISD, because it's where we have identified a bigger need. This is the last priority under the long-term outcome number 1. This is related to youth success. This has been a priority for the Department of Human Services over the last years, but it's an increasing priority because we have incorporated in the city of San Antonio the voice of youth, and the more we listen to them, more we realize about their needs and challenges. The city of San Antonio is committed through the Next Level and other initiatives and through a national partnership with the Aspen Institute to reduce the number of opportunity youth in San Antonio. Opportunity youth are those kids that are 16 to 24, not enrolled in school, not in the labor force. So they are not working, they are not studying, they are disengaged. and our goals and our strategies are related to this. One key strategy for us is to reduce the number of high school dropouts. It's kind of going at one of the possible causes, right? That disengagement with the school, and trying to reduce that and trying to make an early intervention so we don't get to a point where we have the kids that are disconnected. And we have identified some school districts where this is paramount, this is very important: Edgewood, Harlandale, San Antonio ISD, South San Antonio ISD, and Southwest ISD. And overall, our goal is to reduce opportunity youth. And we have tracked that there is a prevalence of disengaged youth in other areas that match with that other group of school districts. That's why we are targeting specific areas. How this can be translated into fundable programs, into programs that will be granted funds from this consolidated funding process. School-based support programs, leadership and development programs, educational and career exploration programs for kids within this age range, initiatives that are meant to provide safe and healthy learning environments for youth, family engagement initiatives that might involve families to improve attendance of kids to the school and academic progress, mentoring. Mentoring has been demonstrated as a very, very positive strategy to re-engage youth. Mentoring and tutoring, alternative schooling, looking for alternative options for kids that are not willing to go to high school, or they have life challenges that hamper them to go to a regular school. Career and technology education, behavioral health and counseling. This is another priority where we would like grantees to be part of that larger integrated effort that our partnerships is doing for the community. The second aspect of this priority would consider funding programs that are meant to provide youth case management, childcare for younger parents, ID recovery in the case of there is a need for that, covering for basic needs, food insecurity, housing, transportation, tutoring, behavioral health. And this is very targeted to one age range, 16 to 24, and we would like to prioritize those school districts. That's what we would like to do. That's our funding priority. Your programs, you can describe in your program how do you plan to address this issue. And we are ready to go to analyze long-term outcome number 2 that you can find in the RFP from pages 7 to 9. Do we need a break? Okay, we don't need a break. Thank you. So long-term outcome number 2. Individuals and families are financially secure and in stable housing. So the city of San Antonio has defined as a community goal, improve the financial security and stability of families and individuals. We have been providing services in this area for many years now. We have a financial empowerment center and a large family assistance division that provides services to low-income residents and individuals. And we also want to fund programs in this area. But this is a very technical, every area in social services requires a very concrete expertise, but definitely financial literacy programs have to meet certain standards that we value as impactful, and we will talk about that later. There are 2 priorities for us under this. One is to prevent domestic violence, because domestic violence has been demonstrated as a major disruptor of any financial stability for families. And it is a priority for the city of San Antonio to address domestic violence. And we would like to fund programs under this priority. And the second one is much more targeted to try to support and provide services to families through financial literacy and other initiatives that might help them stabilize their financials. Long-term outcome number 2 individuals and families are financially secure and in stable housing. Priority number 1, domestic violence prevention. For the city of San Antonio, it's very important to work to reduce the number of family violence assaults. Sorry for my accent. We would like to see a decrease in the number of aggravated family violence and family violence reports that the police share with us through that sharing agreement that we have with them. And we have identified a number of zip codes, up to 24, where the family violence is more prevalent because there is a larger number of cases per number of residents in those zip codes. And we want to prioritize in those areas. How can this be translated into effective programs? So programs funded under this proposal, under this priority, could be programs that are meant to build awareness and training to identify risk, crisis, intervention, and supportive counseling. It is very important that we help our social response teams to identify the triggers and the risk factors to uncover domestic violence. That's why this is one of the funding of the program example. Transitional shelter, individual and family trauma-informed therapy, economic empowerment, so financial support to those individuals that have been victimized and abused, case management, advocacy with legal, right? Sometimes it's a matter of that legal support to get through the different stages of a divorce or whatever the case is, housing, and access to public benefit system, referrals to appropriate services. Those are all examples that might fall under domestic violence. Referral system, right? A 24-hour domestic violence crisis hotline could be funded under this priority. System navigators, how are we gonna make sure that we provide assistance to navigate social services for victims of violence at home? Pro bono legal representation, forensic nurse examiners program support, because we need to make sure that our whole system is equipped to identify domestic violence, lethality assessment, etc. And again, this is a priority for the city of San Antonio to make sure that we can measure the results of these efforts and how these efforts are meant to reduce violence at home for many men and women in San Antonio. Long-term outcome number 2. Oops. Okay. And we will respond to the question later because I cannot see the question, but we will get there. Long-term outcome number 2, priority number 2. So we are still talking about individuals and families and that financial and housing security that we would like to see increase in the overall community, because we are talking about that big picture. Remember that big community? Our goal is to promote, our priority is to promote financial security. And that this has been a priority for the Department of Human Services, as I stated before, financial security for low-income households or for households with family members that are disabled, right? We've seen an increase in poverty among people with disabilities, and we would like to make sure that those families and individuals, they have the support they need to succeed in life. One indicator for us, and the way we plan to track this, is to see a reduce in the percentage of low-income households in the community that are considered by the U.S. Census Bureau as severely cost burden, so that they have to spend more than 50% of their income to maintain their house and pay for their utilities. And we have identified several zip codes where there is a prevalence of this challenge, where there is a large number of residents that are struggling. They use more than half of what they make monthly to have a house. How can this be translated into practical, funded, successful programs that we will be happy to partner with you? Programs that provide financial assistance, medical and prescription assistance, benefits enrollment, food assistance, care management for vulnerable population to improve their overall financial stability, volunteer income tax assistance programs, debt collection legal assistance, low-cost consumer law alternatives, professional one-on-one counseling for financial issues, and benefits navigation. It is important, and again, I think that the RFP is lengthy, but it's very descriptive. Go back to the RFP, review this. If you're interested on applying, on making a proposal for a program under this priority number 2, review our standards, because the city follows some national standards for financial supportive programs. And it is very important for us that if you plan to apply for this, you are aware of those standards and you demonstrate that you follow those standards that have been demonstrated more successfully. And that, again, I always mention this idea. For us, it's very important to make sure that we can track the success of your programs. And I will stop and go back to that question. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna read the question out loud. I cannot, sorry. So there is a question on the chat from Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your question. Do programs have to serve youth? So I think we are talking about this one. On those ages, or is the goal to prevent problems by meeting needs of youth who are younger? Okay, so thank you, Elizabeth. So our priority as City of San Antonio is to address and reduce opportunity youth. But if you have a clear understanding that by serving youth in an early age, you are causing an impact on reducing those dropouts, and that you can have a positive impact in retaining and re-engaging those youth in the long term, build a program for that, make your case, we will consider it. So our priority is this age range. But what we want to make sure is that we allow expert agencies that are working in the field to tell us what are the most effective programs. If you are persuaded that your program serving younger kids or younger ages has a positive impact in reducing this issue, explain it to us, let us know, and we will definitely consider it for funding. Hope what? No, priority number 2 is more, it's focused mostly on families and individuals. We have a specific long-term outcome dedicated to homeless and homeless prevention. So let me get to that, and I hope I might be able to answer your question, Michelle. So let's recap a little bit so we are all on the same page. The Department of Human Services has 4 long-term outcomes. Number 1, children and youth. 4 priorities: child abuse, college, career, and military readiness, kinder readiness, and youth success. Long-term outcome number 2, serving individuals and families to make sure that they are financially secure and in stable housing. 2 priorities: reduce domestic violence, provide financial services to increase security. Are we all together, right? And then long-term outcome number 3, homeless is rare, brief, and not recurring in our community. The City of San Antonio has always been doing an effort to reduce homelessness in San Antonio, but I'm proud to say that we are increasing our effort and our commitment to reduce homelessness and to provide upstream services to prevent residents to become homeless. In the request for proposals, in the PDF that you all have, you can have a longer description of our priorities under this long-term outcome from pages 10 to 14. We want to serve families that are literally homeless, that are already, families or individuals that are already unsheltered or in emergency shelters or shelters, but with no means to maintain their own housing status. But we are also focusing on individuals that are at risk of experiencing homelessness. And we want to target specific demographic groups that, through our analysis, have a higher level of vulnerability. And we will go through that: youth, families, veterans, unsheltered and chronic homeless, and individuals with HIV or AIDS. Homelessness is a complicated business, as many of you know. So we need to make sure that agencies applying for services here have the expertise required, the knowledge that comes through many years of service, and the understanding of the hard terminology, that they are partnering with SARA, accessing and managing HAMIS, and they are part of the continuum of care. And probably you all are, but I want to remind the importance of that level of professionalism, that standard that we are looking for. We have 4 goals. Our priority is 1, end homelessness, period. But we have targeted 5 groups, 5 demographic groups, and I'm gonna go one by one, trying to give you examples of programs that we would be happy to fund. One of our priorities is to address homeless youth. And this is a tricky priority for the ones of you working with youth homelessness. It's often referred as a hidden reality, right? Youth homeless, there is this quote that says youth homeless don't look like homeless. Identify youth homeless is a priority for us, not just identify them for the sake of identifying them. Identify and connect them to resources to make sure that that bad time in their life, it's a one-time event that never happens again, and they are meant to succeed in their own lives. And the goal for us is to increase the number of identified youth homeless in HAMIS and enroll in either emergency shelter, permanent housing, supporting services. And as you can see, our understanding of youth here is broader, right? It's 0 to 24 years old. Under the long-term outcome number 3, reduce homelessness, our focus on youth homeless is meant to fund programs that are open to do street outreach, including transportation for clients, low barrier emergency shelters or drop-in shelters, transitional housing, permanent support housing, case management, system navigation, rapid rehousing, educational employment and daily living skill training proposals. All of those, as far as they are targeting youth, we will be very happy to fund those to make sure that we reduce the number of youth that are at risk or homeless, and that we see an increase on them connected to the resources that the community offers. The second goal, or the second preferred demographic for us under homelessness, are veterans. A priority is for all home veterans to be housed, and we would like to make sure that 100% of identified veterans in San Antonio who accept housing, right, services are placed into permanent housing within 3 months. That is the goal. We are aware of the challenges about accepting or not accepting housing. We are also service providers in the homeless, to the homeless community. But our goal is to make sure that these people that have served the country, they have everything they need to succeed and not necessarily being in the streets. Low barrier emergency shelters, transitional housing, case management, system navigation, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. The strategies are very similar, right, for youth than for veterans. And these are the type of programs that we will be happy to fund under this long-term outcome number 3, goal 2. We would also see, and we have seen a positive trend in the reduction of homeless families in San Antonio, which is a good indicator that we are doing the right effort. We don't want to see families in the streets. We want to make sure that families, especially with young children, are provided with the services that they need to make the next step in their lives. This is a priority for the Department of Human Services. We use the measurements of the point-in-time count. we would like to see a 25% reduction in the number of families that are unhoused. Programs that we would like to fund under this priority: financial assistance, everything that's prevention, it's very relevant for us. Financial assistance, counseling, eviction prevention, rental assistance, utility assistance, case management, anything related to housing stabilization services, diversion, case management services, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, etc. Chronic homeless. The goal number 4 under the long-term outcome number 3 is to reduce the number of chronic homeless. And this is a negative trend for our community. Unfortunately, we are seeing an increase in chronic unshelters. Our goal is to see a reduction in unsheltered chronic homeless by 25% in 2025. And we are aware that this is the toughest group because they have been, in many cases, they have been unsheltered for a longer period of time, and re-engagement or outreach might be more difficult. The type of programs that we would like to fund here include also services in Haven for Hope Courtyard, food services, domestic violence counseling in the courtyard, but also transitional housing, diversion, shower program, case management, and for sure, a street outreach, which is key to re-engage with this group. And here's the HOPWA. EFA, what is EFA? Emergency Family Assistance. It depends. There is a question from Michelle about emergency family assistance. She's asking if it falls under priority 2 or priority 3. Michelle, I think it depends on your preferred target population. So if your preferred target population is the community as a whole, low-income residents, I will recommend you to present it under strategy long-term outcome number 2, strategy 2, that's financial stability. But if you are planning to serve mostly at risk of homelessness or homeless families, definitely go for the long-term outcome number 3. But that's for you to determine. This, as you can see, our long-term outcomes are very aligned with demographics. So the first one is youth and children. The second one is more around families. The third one is around homelessness, and the fourth one is around older adults. So it depends on your demographics. Yes, yes. All hope. So there, Michelle asked also if all HOPWA programs go under priority number 3. Yes, because as you all know, the city of San Antonio, and this is, I'm going to elaborate here a little bit. Under the long-term outcome number 3, reduce homelessness, we have a very specific priority, a very specific goal to prevent homelessness among residents with AIDS, AIDS, or HIV, because the city is a grantee from HUD to provide services and serve individuals through the HOPWA program. So what we want to do is to prevent these individuals of becoming homelessness. And we will track this to make sure that at least 80% of low-income households with individuals that have been identified with HIV or AIDS served by HOPWA are placed and maintain housing. If you plan to provide services in this area, definitely this is the long-term outcome number 3, goal number 5. Program examples: homeless prevention services, social service support, case management, including transportation, substance abuse treatment, mental health, job training, nutritional services, health services, permanent supportive housing, etc. There is, if you're interested in this specific program, go to page 14. Page 14 on the RFP, there is a very clear description of what we are willing to fund under the HOPWA program. And if you're okay, I'm ready to transition to the last long-term outcome. dedicated to older adults. Seniors are healthy, engaged, and independent. As you all know, the city of San Antonio is highly committed to serve older adults in our community, 60 years and older. We have 12 comprehensive, we call them comprehensive senior centers. Those are integrated senior centers. There is one very close to here, West Elm, just across the street. These senior centers provide services to older adults, basic health services, a large group of recreational, educational, and social services, and nutritional programs through a state grant. For the socialization part, for the educational training, wellness programs, we want you to make proposals to fund initiatives that can happen in our senior centers to support the needs of our older adults and make sure that they have everything they need to age properly. Under the older adults long-term outcome, we only have one strategy, and our strategy is to make sure that 90% of older adults that are participating in the comprehensive senior centers of the city of San Antonio report an improvement in their physical, social, and mental well-being. This is not the, sorry. Sorry, give me a second here. Forget about this, this is a typo. It's not HIDs, these are the seniors, sorry. Don't look at that, only look at the gray box. I apologize for this. Program examples that we are willing to fund under the long-term outcome number 4. Sorry for this. Health and wellness, yes.
Go back to the other slide then, if this is not right.
Yes, let's stay here so I don't cause any trouble. And you can find a very lengthy description of what we are planning to fund under this strategy on page 15, 1-5. Programs that we would like to fund here: health and wellness classes, fitness and dance classes, art classes, creative writing, nutritional programs, technology instruction for older adults, benefits counseling, helping them to navigate the social services. We have seen an increase in poverty among older adults overall in the nation, in the state of Texas, and definitely in the city of San Antonio over the last 5 years. So helping them to access the resources that are available to them, it's paramount for us. Caregiver support, service coordinator, consumer interest classes, disability services. And we will prioritize services provided in the city of San Antonio comprehensive senior centers. So I think we're gonna take a brief break, but I just wanna recap briefly. We talk about the framework that we use to define our priorities and that we would like you to use to define your measurements is the result-based accountability framework. And we try to walk through the funding priorities that the City of San Antonio Department of Human Services has for this RFP. You have a very, very well description of our priorities and the rationale under our priorities in the RFP. Again, pages 4 to 15. I recommend you to read through it slowly and carefully to make sure that you identify the best fit for your proposed program. Let's take a pause here, have a 5-minute break. We will be back at 9:30. Thank you.
Serve 100 clients through this RFP, and 100 through another RFP. Do those need to be separate clients or separate groups of clients? So can you elaborate a little more? Are you talking about are the services different, or are these different programs? Or are you talking about agency as a whole? And you can unmute yourself and ask.
That pen sucks.
That's fine. Can you just go ahead and type it out for us then?
So Kyle, can you hear me on the mic? Well, I don't know that you can respond, but I'm going to go with a yes. So if you're applying for money through the ARPA RFP, and it's say for program A, which offers, for example, after-school tutoring, and you're going to serve 100 clients with that. That's one program. If through Consolidated, you're going to expand those services so that those same 100 clients now get a new service, such as maybe interviewing, right? Like mock interviews to help prep them for job interviews. Then you could count that same 100 clients would count as their own unduplicated through Consolidated if it were funding, because technically it's almost like a different program. The Consolidated would be funding a brand new different service that they would not otherwise get if not for this additional funding. Now, if you're applying through ARPA or any RFP for after school tutoring for 100 students, and then you're going to apply for more money through Consolidated, where you simply want to ask for additional money for that program, then we would expect to see an increase in the clients. In other words, if it is just more tutoring that you're going to be providing, then you couldn't count the same 100 students that were counted through the ARPA tutoring. You'd have to be able to say, I'm getting an influx of additional money for the same program. I thus need to produce more clients that are served because I have more money. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Kyle, for the question. Okay, so moving on. So first we talked about the RBA framework, right? With the framework to define the performance measures. We talked about how you have your clients, and then you have, those are the ones that you serve. And then from there, we actually do the analysis on the total population. Next, we talked about the long-term outcome funding priorities. And these are those codes of funding priorities that you'll find in the RFP. So that's what your service, those are the individuals that your services are targeting. And those are the changes that we're actually going to try and measure. So the last thing we're going to talk about here are your actual programs. And these are the services that you're providing. So we'll talk about your program definition and the performance measures that will help you move the needle when it comes to those funding priorities. Before I move on, I do want to ask, are there any more questions about the long-term outcomes? Because again, when it comes to your program definitions and your performance measures, you do want them to align with that. And like I said, it's in that, as we've repeatedly said, it is in that whole pamphlet or the whole RFP package. So just want to make sure. All right. If not, we'll go ahead and get them at the end. So first thing that we'll talk about are program definitions and measures. And most of this you'll find it in, well, attachment net. Number one, you want to identify the LTO and priority area closely related to your program or your proposed program. Now, if you read attachment A, it says most closely aligns with your proposed program. We understand that some of your programs actually have multiple areas that they address, multiple dimensions, right? But you really want to find that one specific area that you actually work in, whether it's children and youth or individual and families. Homelessness is rare, and older adults. I know there was a couple of questions about, using HOPWA for individual and families. Well, no, if you're going for HOPWA, it would be in homelessness. And again, it's in that attachment. So again, find that one that's mostly aligned with what you do or what that service is going to be provided. And then describe your program with clarity. We have to be very specific on this and very clear. We want to make sure that we're clear to you all. When you describe your program, you have to be very specific about what your program is doing and how it's going to serve the community, or at least those individual clients within the community. Again, you know, how you're actually going to serve the clients, when you're going to serve, how many you're actually going to provide, how long do you expect to be able to measure this and actually see a change within your client? Can you capture the client from the beginning, and then can you actually determine the outcome, whether it's through a survey? So being able to track your client and provide all that information all the way to the very end, very specific about your program, okay? And then number 3, which is attachment F, we'll go over define your metrics and targets of your program. So again, how many clients are you serving? You know, when we say opportunity youth, are we talking just 16 to 24? And then if you're saying homeless youth, is your potential client 0 to 17, or is it going to be 18 to 24? It doesn't necessarily have to serve all of them, but nonetheless, being very specific about who you're serving and what you do, you know, and again, those targets. I'm going to do 100 within this FY or this FY quarter. So things like that. So this is the fun part. Well, at least all of us. Defining your program and your performance metrics. Right? Proposed program plan, and you'll find this in attachment 8. So question 8, it's reference to attachment of performance measure scorecard. And this is a scorecard that you'll all be using to actually define your performance measures. Okay, so it's going to talk about different things like your input, your output, you know, how well you're doing, how much you're doing, going back to those key things that we were talking about. So when it comes to effort and impact, and we'll go over it a little more when we actually go through some of this. But anyway, provide performance measure and your annual targets will be tracked to assess the services provided, participant achieved, and client satisfaction to determine the impact of your program. These things, so when we talk about services provided, again, it comes into the next slide, but we're talking about your input. You know, how many people are you actually serving? You know, that's your quantity, you know, and so we talk about the next thing, the participant achievements. That's going to be the quality of your services and what they've accomplished after. That's kind of the output of everything. And then your client satisfaction to demonstrate, I apologize, demonstrate the impact of your program. So the client satisfaction goes into the impact, and we'll talk about this a little later. But then again, then it's really about what happened at the end. After we provided all these services, after we did this for 1, 2, 3, or 4 quarters, how did our client come better off at the very end of all of this? So again, performance measures should include measures of quantity and quality, and we'll show you how to do that in the next slide. So performance measures scorecard attachment F, which you'll see, it has 2 parts. So part 1, again, identify the plan to measure the effort that your program will implement. Be very specific about your program. How are you going to provide the services? If you're providing transportation services, how long, things like that. If you're providing homeless services to youth, exactly specifically, what are you planning on doing for those youth that will make them better off in the end? You know, are you working with, if you're talking about homeless youth, are you trying to get them into housing, temporary shelter, things like that? Your program, and then the second part, your program, identify your plan to measure the impact of your program. So it's not just enough that you say we've served 100 people. We're asking you what happened after you served 100 people. You know, how did they come out better off in the end? Because that's the only way we're going to be able to see the whole population, or at least be able to measure it against the population in the end. And then set realistic targets of your program. We all want to do as much as possible. Realistic targets, we know we want to find and serve everybody in the community that needs our help. But the truth is you may not have the capacity to do that. So we're only expecting you to find the targets that your program can actually serve. Again, there's other programs out there that can do it. So we'll measure that with that. And again, those targets of your program, those are going to be within the 2 and 3 circle that we see right here at the bottom. Again, those are your client services. Like that's where it starts right there. And so set SMART PMs and targets, going back to kind of specifically what we were just saying then. You want to be very specific about your target, right? your target and your definitions. If your definition isn't target or your performance measure isn't, or if your performance measure isn't specific and clear, then you're not actually going to have a very good target or even be able to set a realistic target for what your program is actually going to be able to serve. So again, whatever target you have and whatever definition you choose for your performance measure, ensure that it's clearly defined. And truthfully, same thing with your whole plan. Like, be very specific. Measurable. Your target is measurable. There's a system to track it. It's one thing to say that we want to be able to track 100 clients. Do you have a system that you can track 100 clients? You know, thinking about your actual capacity. Are we using some type of automated system, or is this, you know, just using an accounting book? Do you have the type?
Oh, shit.
Oh,
My volume was down.
one second. Okay. And then, so the next one out of the SMART acronym is measurable. Ensure your target is measurable. And again, there's a system to track it. Some people have automated systems. Some people, you know, have other little antiquated systems, but nonetheless, they're still good systems based off of what they're doing. But ensure that with whatever system you're using, that you're able to track it, you know, from beginning to end. If I say I'm tracking clients, or if I'm tracking mileage travel, or how many people are actually going into my automated system. Attainable. Again, setting those attainable targets. They have to be realistic based on resources. Again, what is the capacity of your service? Do you have enough case managers to serve 200 people? It depends on the type of service you're trying to provide, you know, and then the historical and the context of everything that's going on, you know, and that's where we're trying to help you with not just this, but the things that we provide in the packets, you know, some of the historical context of what we see within the community, so that when you look at it, you can tell, all right, this is the direction that homelessness is going. So what do I have to do with my clients to try and move the needle? Or this is the direction that we see in senior services or domestic violence. Again, same thing, looking at what's gone in the history and then basing your approach off of that. And then, of course, relevant, and that's relevant to your program. You all may have, depending on your agency, you may have multiple programs or services that you provide. When you're filling out this packet for whatever program you're doing, ensure that you stick to that program. Be very specific about the program. Try not to get too caught up in every other service that you do provide, unless it does kind of feed into it. But nonetheless, be specific and make sure your program's relevant. And then time-based. And again, by this, we mean, can it be tracked? Some of the services that we provide or some of the services that some people may provide are applications for certain things. All right, if you provide an application and the outcome isn't based on you, it's based on some other type of service that's extended beyond you, say like Social Security or say like immigration, you may not be able to track that because that's not based off of you. Like sometimes that stuff takes years, especially if you're doing legal work too. So if you're talking about types of legal services with any of these programs, legal services are kind of like this long, broad thing that happens later on. You may not be able to track that outcome. You may be able to track the output, but then again, we don't know how better off the individual is. So a lot of that stuff comes after. And what we're asking when we're talking about time-based and tracking that is that you're able to at least track and find out what's the outcome, because that's what we want to get to. We want to understand the impact of all of these services. So defining your performance measures using the RBA. These are some things that we're talking about. So provide performance measures and annual targets that will be tracked to assess the effort and impact of your service. What this means is, again, going back into how many people you actually input into the system and quality of work that comes out of it. And then, of course, at the very end, how is this person doing any better than they were the day before? You know, because that's really what we want to get to. How are they any better off? We could provide as many services as we want, but if it doesn't change their outcome, if it doesn't change what you anticipate, then what are we doing? So talking about the quantity. And first, let me just go over the performance measure scorecard real quick. All right, so the performance measure scorecard, you see at the top, we have the agency name. That is your unique agency, the agency that's providing the service. The program name is going to be the particular service that you will be providing. So I understand many agencies have many programs that touch many different clients, different types of people with different vulnerabilities. Your program name is going to be specific to that one area that you're actually applying for in this RFP here. Okay. And then enter the amount that you requested for a 2-year term. And then of course it has the contract terms there. So we look at the proposed, if we go down here, lower, we look at the proposed program. The number right there is actually the number of the PM, and that's really for us to keep tracking. The proposed program measure description, that's where you're actually going to describe what's going on. And then of course, the target number of clients achieving this measure. And that's going to be what you expect to end at the end, or what's the anticipated expectation of how many clients you want to serve at the end of all of this, or at the end of the FY. Okay. And then of course, there are other metrics, which we'll talk about a little bit. So as mentioned, while you have certain performance measures that speak to your program or service directly, there may be other measures that actually feed into that can help you get above that. So one of the questions earlier was, do you have to serve clients within a certain specific range when it comes to opportunity youth? Can you serve clients before that? Well, yes, you can, because again, these sort of prevention services feed into that service later on. So explaining how I serve individuals outside of opportunity youth may actually explain some of the other performance measures of, how many opportunity youth did we not have come back, or how many we didn't get in the first place from that specific school district. So again, that one just kind of helps you support what you're doing later on. So going back to quantity, we have a question here. So the question says, thank you, Elizabeth. And it says, so we enter the amount for 2 years, but the number served for 1 year. Is that correct? You will enter the amount for the 2-year contract term, but your individual scorecards will have it broken down by FY. Is that? Yes. 2 years. 2 years. Yeah.
Match up what's on the, what they're putting
What
in
they're-
the budget.
So yes, it should be the 2 years. So yes, the sum of the 2 years. Okay, so again, after we went over the scorecard. So again, quantity is the first thing. That's your effort. And that's who are the customers? How many are you serving? And then quality, how well did we do it? It can be different things from getting them certified or having your own individual certified to perform higher level of care. And then is anyone better off? These are the impact of your services. Like I said, what is the outcome after everything that we've done? How is my client actually doing better than when they first walked through our doors, or through your doors, should I say? Again, performance measure accountability, and these are the ways that we would do that. So quantity, how much did we do? How much service delivery, or how much service did we deliver? That's usually a number, so one person came in, one person came out. It's your foot traffic, things like that. We gave this many rides. We found this many opportunity youth out there. We entered this many people in HMIS, or the Homeless Management Information System, things like that. The quality, how well did we deliver services? Out of the people that came through our door, what's the percentage of them that stayed? What's the percentage of them that achieved that goal that we were trying to get them to? What's the percentage of that actually graduated? Those are the things that we talk about when it comes to quality. But both of those measure your effort, your agency and your program's effort alone. The impact at the end is how much change did we produce? And by change, we're not talking about the population again. We're talking about your individual service. So you remember the 3 bubbles? We're talking about the client population. How did you change that client population's life? So how much change did you produce? And then what quality of change did we produce? Again, based off of when they first came in to when they come out, how much better off are they? And we use this on our level also, when we're talking about the community goals, because we're going to look at the same things. How many services were delivered across all the programs and across all the information that we received? And then how well were the services delivered? And then how much change was produced throughout the whole community? Because that's what we truly want to know. So when it comes around again, you know, everybody can base things off their capacity and actually do their services the way they design them for. Go ahead. And then we have a question from Allison. Thank you, Allison. Do the client need to be unduplicated across the full 2 years, or count each client once in every year, similar to the way delegate agencies are measuring now? Yeah. So we will address that in the addendum. We have not discussed that yet. So the question was, do the clients need to be unduplicated across the full 2-year term, or count each client once in each year, similar to the way current delegate agencies measure now? So as the term ends the first year, would you be able to count them again next year? Especially, I mean, case management, that's obviously one of those things. You know, if you're working with somebody that's across a full 2 years, it's not going to happen overnight. So can you count them the next year this comes up again? So they'll address that. Agency, yeah, exactly. So.
They're promoting from 3rd grade to 4th grade.
They're still the same kids. Yeah. Yeah, we'll address that. Same kid, yeah. Same kid, yeah. So, yes, thank you for that. Same client across the whole time. Okay. Next time. So this one, just going further into this, the quantity and quality, just giving you a little specifics. So quantity for the effort of what you do. How many clients did you serve? How many activities you conduct? You know, if you conduct community events, things like that. The total dollar amount that you spent. Quality, so how well did you do it? Timeliness, you know, standardization of costs. If you have a standard based off of certification, you know, how long did it take them to do that? And then did you meet a certain standard? For childcare services things, they have to be Texas Ready 3? The new TRS standard. The new TRS standard for childcare services, everybody has to be TRS 3. So things like that. Are you meeting the standards for whatever your industry or whatever the service you provide? Your completion rates, how many people came in, how many people actually graduated, you know, and then the cost per unit. And then, of course, the impact. These are the changes in their actual living situation or the changes in their behavior. So the changes in their behavior, their attitude, their circumstances, knowledge, and skills. So these are the things that the human capacity that will help them get over that ledge, you know, get beyond those barriers that were holding them back before. And again, that's how we determine if they're better off. For things like education. So again, quantity or the effort, number of students you provide, quality, student to teacher ratio, things like that. And then of course, the impact, you know, how many people graduated high school and then the percent of high school graduates. And of course, you can go on further, especially if we're talking about the long-term outcome of getting them college and career military ready. You know, how many of them actually got into college, career, military ready. Drug and alcohol treatment programs, things like that. A number of persons treated, a percentage of your staff that's actually certified and trained with some type of license. And then, of course, the number of clients that actually come off drugs and your percent of clients that do, you know, remain. So your 3 key questions to consider, of course, when we're going through these performance measures and scorecards. Right? Who are our customers, clients, and people we serve? And going back to that SMART acronym, be very specific about who you serve. You know, is it children? Is it families? Is it opportunity youth? Is it all youth? You know, seniors, what is the age limit that you're doing for seniors? You know, based off of what your program provides. How do we measure that our services are being delivered well? You know, talking about your client staff, the capacity of your actual service, unit costs, your turnover rate. And then, of course, how do we measure that our customers and clients are better off? This is one of those things we we are asking you to try and find a way to measure in the end, you know, whether it's through a survey or whether it's through testing skills, performance and literacy skills. So performance measures about clients' results, percent of children with good literacy skills. Again, you have to have a way to measure that. So ensuring that you have a way to measure that and then express it in the end. Yeah. And then Laura Serrano is going to go ahead and go over this scorecard also. This is the council scorecard, or talking about the targets by council district.
Thank you, Ronnie. So Ronnie has talked to you about the part that you have to do, right? So you have to describe a comprehensive program, detailed as best as possible. That's your attachment E. But it includes the scorecard. So how are you going to measure it? And Ronnie has provided a very easy, I hope, easy to follow tool to describe that, following the RBA. How much, how well, is there anyone better off? Those are the three metrics that we expect from you in each one of the scorecards. And we will clarify through the addenda if we are looking at 1 year data or if it will be for the whole length of the contract. And the contract management division will take care of that, and we will have a very short response on that. But this time, for the agencies that are familiar with ARPA, this is not new, but for most of the delegate agencies funded through the city of San Antonio, this is a new instrument that you will find in the RFP. It's second part of the scorecard that asks you to determine out of the performance metric number 1. So remember here, let me go back a little bit. In your scorecard, there is a mandatory thing. That's why it's in white. We need to know how many unduplicated clients are you expected to serve, right? Out of this number 1, out of these many, let's put an example. We have someone here in person that's hoping to continue providing transportation services for older adults. So the question would be, how many do you expect to be able to serve, or in a year, or during the duration of the contract? So when you go to the second part of the scorecard, we ask you to provide you the best estimate possible of how many are you planning to serve by council district. As you can understand, there is a clear need to provide services across the city, and there is a request from our council districts to make sure that we provide funding to services across the city. We understand that the needs, geographical needs in the city are different. So we don't ask you to make up numbers. We ask you to be honest. If you provide services only in one specific council district, be transparent and provide the notes here at the end of the scorecard. You can add your note and say, mostly my services are provided in this area because of this and that, and etc. But it is very important for us to start capturing to what extent we are serving a growing city that is extended through 10 large council districts, and making sure that residents across the city have access to the services they need. There is a question on the chat from Janet. If a council district doesn't qualify as in the 7 to 10 equity rate, would they be excluded? My recommendation to this is, let's try to don't, and I know it's complicated, but let's try to make sure that we separate things. So we ask you to use the Equity Atlas to define the need of your program. So you want to target this specific census tracts in whatever council district, because you have seen, let's put a very clear example, the domestic violence, right? So there is you have identified certain census tracts where they score very high in the equity index because there is a concentration of low-income residents and there is a concentration of people of color, and then those match with our priority areas for addressing domestic violence. If all of that happens to be in Council District 5 or in Council District 3, you put in your notes here, the majority of my clients will probably be served in this area because we have proven demonstration that this is an area where there is a high prevalence of the problem that we are trying to address. So what we are trying to do here is to capture to what extent services might be provided across the city. But we understand perfectly that there are certain concentration of problems in certain areas of town. So this is not an evenly distributed request. We don't ask you to distribute your services evenly across the council district. What we are asking you is to try to honestly let us know where your services are going to be mostly provided. I hope I have responded. And there is another question, right? Is the funding stream for long-term outcome number 3, the one related to homelessness, coming from the general fund or is ESG CDBG grant? I'm gonna pass that question to Natalie Sertucci. If it's general fund or ESDG, the homelessness, long-term outcome number 3, homelessness.
So we don't determine the funding streams in advance. In other words, the reason it's called consolidated funding is because it's a pool of funding. So what we ask y'all to do is submit your proposals, and the city will make the decision after we've reviewed the proposals, which funding stream may fund you. So you will not know that until afterwards and if you are funded. In other words, yeah, so it could come from general fund, it could come from ESG, it could come from HAPWA. It could come from a brand new funding source. We will not be able to disclose that to you unless you're actually awarded a contract. And then if the program, so if the program does not serve adults, does this form not apply? No, the form still does apply. So what most of you will see is that we collect the data based on the adult clients that are served. What a lot of y'all did, I think in past ones, is if your program is solely targeted to students where you'll be collecting the youth's information, then you can simply add a PM right below it that would say number of unduplicated youth served, and you should tell us in parentheses the age demographic. This is also a really good example, though, of how your performance measure scorecard needs to complement with what you're putting in attachment E, question number 2, which asks you to describe your proposed program plan and the clients you will serve. If your program is tailored towards youth, and those are the clients you will serve, you can simply put in that paragraph that you will be serving your unduplicated PM number 1 as listed on attachment F is referring to youth age 12 through 18. Does that make sense? You basically remember your panel is looking at your attachments as a whole integrated proposal for your program. So you can use question 2 and attachment E to further elaborate that your PM number 1 is not going to be unduplicated adults, but unduplicated youth. You still must submit the form for the total number of unduplicated clients your program will serve, whether they are youth or adults.
What was the other question?
Good question. What they have, if they're tracking them over 2 years.
So
I want to go back real quick because the whole point of the technical assistance workshop is that we want to get you the information now. We appreciate that y'all came to the workshop. Don't get me wrong, we're still going to issue the addendum so that everything we tell you today is formalized. And really, it's a protection for you to hold us to the answers we give you. With that said, the question that came up, which I thought was a really good question, and I appreciate the person who asked it, which is, if you are proposing your programs, because we have a change this year and we are actually funding for 2 years, right? Is unduplicated clients for 1 year or 2 years? If you look through the proposal, and if you really look at attachment F, everything that we've given you, it says that you need to give us the number of unduplicated clients per 2 years. If you look at the attachment that we gave you, that is a sample contract, you can check out the section. And again, that contract may take a little bit of, we may amend it slightly, but usually what we give y'all in the RFP is what we plan on executing. There's a section in there which says your contract term will be for 1 year with an intention to automatically renew it for the second year. And it references that the year 2 budget and performance measures that are listed within the contract. So when you are filling out your proposal in attachment attachment F, part 1, your number of unduplicated clients served, whether they're youth or adults, should be those that you plan to serve the total amount over a 2-year period. Okay. Now, I know one of the questions that came up from our live audience, so I thank the ladies who showed up in person because it helps us to have the conversation, was, well, what happens if your program is kind of like school-based, right? And it only goes 1 year, and then your kids are going to graduate. That's okay. What that would basically mean to you is when you go to attachment C and you look at, I'm sorry, I don't mean to confuse you when I'm listing the wrong attachments. I'm flipping back and forth between the paper. When you go to attachment E and you look at question number 2, which says to describe the proposed program services to include a description of the program and identification of the age group and number to be served. This would be a perfect opportunity for you to write the specifics about your program design. In other words, a case management program, kind of like Ronnie said, you may propose, you're asking for $200,000 and you know that over the 2 years, you'll be able to provide case management services, and you'd probably have 2 options. You could either choose to offer a 1-year case management service where you serve 50 clients in the first year and 50 clients in the second year. If you did that, the way you would actually translate that through your proposal is your unduplicated client count, PM number 1 on attachment F, would be 100, right? And then in question number 2, you would explain to us that this is a 1-year program offering case management services for 1 year, that a client may be eligible to re-enroll in year 2. That tells us that you may have clients who are counted in year 1 and year 2, and we're going to count them both because it's based on the type of program. In other words, they're re-enrolling. They may not all come back, but some of them may. Now that's different. Another program design may be something like you may opt to say, we're doing 2-year funding. There's value to us to provide case management services over 2 years to continue the relationship with that same client. If that's the case, then on PM number 1, you'd be putting 50 are your unduplicated. And then in your question number 2 on the attachment E, you would be talking about how the 2-year funding is going to enable you to provide more intensive case management services that maybe previously you only did it for a year. Now you're going to be able to serve 50 people up to 2 years of service. What I'm trying to make sure that all of you understand is how you can use the attachments they're all telling the same story. What you write in attachment E under your proposed program plan is complementing the data that you're telling us in attachment F, your performance measure scorecard. One more example to help kind of expand on this. If you're a school program where one of your measures of success, if it's at the end of the year, the school's reading, the grade increases, then you may, for 2 years, your total clients served may be, let's say you serve 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Your total clients may be 200, right? But maybe 50 of those are 3rd graders in year 1, where 1 year into the program, we're going to ask you for their reading scores. And if there's an increase, then they're unduplicated within that first year. But then they're now 4th graders. And when they come back in the 4th grade, they can re-enroll in your reading program to see if they continue to increase their reading scores. That's another example of where you would still count the same 50 children. They would, in your unduplicated, you would have a total of 100, right? Because they're receiving services for 2 years, but you've essentially got a 1-year program. And your question number 2, you would be explaining to us that the program is a 1 year with results that show after 1 year, but a student may come back and choose to re-enroll in the program because your program serves people of different age groups. They can progress within it. You'd still have to have a performance measure, like Laura was saying, a better off. We need to see a better off within that first year, but that would shape your unduplicated clients. So I don't mean to complicate it further. I think the key takeaway for all of you when you think about how you're writing these proposals is that, remember, the proposal is just that, a proposal. The biggest thing you can really do when you look at your proposal is make sure the story you're telling doesn't contradict itself against when you compare attachments. If you're writing 50 or 100 unduplicated and you think there's even a chance that we may not understand what you mean by unduplicated, spend 2 sentences on question number 2 and let us know how your program design tracks that unduplicated. Say we are counting This is a one-year program. They may re-enroll the next year. That will give us, the panel, that information. And ultimately, what it comes back to still is your proposal. Everything should be tailored for 2 years. We have done this intentionally because we don't want to put you through the contract execution process again. We will be able to amend scorecards if needs be, but if that happens in year 2, that means we have to do an entire amendment. Our goal is really to meet you where you're at and say most of your programs would benefit if y'all could strategize and plan for up to 2 years. And then you have that time to implement that. So my recommendation to you is your proposal, everything is based on 2 years. Will there be room to adjust? You bet. We're going to work with you. We're going to come alongside you and work with you. But the more thought you put into your strategy and planning in your proposal, the easier it'll make us as we execute the contract to know where we're going with that. Ultimately, you design your program. You tell us what that design is. I hope that helps. Okay, so there's a question that says, should we report here where the office is or where the clients come from? I'm a little unclear on that.
I think you are talking about the council district questions. So everything in our scorecard is related. So the scorecard has 2 parts. The part 1 that Natalie has helped you understand, and everything in the scorecards is meant to measure the service that you do. There is only one question that can be more internal, is the how well that can talk about the quality of your service and might talk about your agency. But when we look at the council district distribution, we are talking about distribution of your clients. You might have your, let's think about the transportation example that we put to before. The offices might be in Council District 5, but they might be serving residents all across the city. So this is very important. Your scorecards are meant to measure your clientele, the impact that you are making in your clients. There is one more question. So if we put 200 clients on this form, it will be assumed 100 per each year. And I'm gonna, thank you for the question, but I'm gonna go back to what Natalie said. We won't assume anything if you tell us the true story. So you have the key part of your application is the program definition. It's attachment E, proposed program plan. Whatever you tell us, we will believe it. So if you think that you can serve 200 clients across 2 years, but you expect that the first year it's gonna be slower, that the engagement would take you longer, and if you think that you can only serve 60 during the first year, but that will build the momentum for you to serve 140 on the second year, write it down, explain it to us and say, hey, my goal or my smart target, my well-thought target is that I hope to be able to serve 200 unduplicated clients across the 2-year term of this contract. But I am aware that because of the nature of my program and the nature of my service, this can take a process. So I anticipate that this will be done this way or another. So you are free. The scorecards are an Excel for you to fulfill, but you are free to write and explain us in attachment E in your proposed plan, how do you think, or how do you feel, or how do you know that you are going to serve the community? This is, Natalie said that, and Ronnie, and it's very important, be very specific and clear and very transparent. It is very important for us that we understand the way you plan to address these different community issues that we organize around 4 long-term outcomes, so we can make sure that we are funding the right initiatives that are meant to have the higher impact. So sometimes Spanish get to my mind. Vamos atrás. Let's recap a little bit because I know it's a lot, and I know it's been a long week for you all. This is the 3rd session. Ronnie explained to you the framework that we use. Ronnie explained to you how we use this RBA method. We intentionally choose that image of the puzzle because we want you to look at the community as a big puzzle where there are many different pieces. Your programs are one piece of that puzzle. So we ask you to be a meaningful piece of a larger puzzle where the city of San Antonio has identified certain priorities. There is no funding for everything, for every need. That's why we prioritize very intentionally, and we prioritize trying to build alignment with the effort that we put through our direct services. And we want you to take the time and be clear and concise in the description of your program. Once you have your program written, once you have very clear description of your program, then go to the attachments, open attachment F. There is a very simple Excel, and write it down to the best of your ability. When you complete the attachment F, there are two parts. The part one that has to measure those three key things that Ronnie explained to you. How much, how many clients are you going to serve? How well are you going to serve? What is the distinct value that your serving is putting? And how are you making a difference in the life of your clients? Write it down, set realistic targets, explain whatever is need to be explained. And then on the second part of the scorecard, realistically tell us how many of those unduplicated clients that you are expecting to serve are in each school district. And be transparent, right? So we would like to see that we can serve a residents across the city. And then and this is extremely important. What happens if my program receives funds? You will receive funds if your program is clean, clear, well elaborated, and if you complete a good application. We will determine that we distribute funds. And as you all know, and for many of you that have been working more than a year now with Natalie, our only goal is to put the money out there and make sure that we continue serving the community. So we are completely aligned in the same direction. What happens next? We will start a process of negotiation that's called contract negotiation, where all these more specific questions about I intend to serve 200, should be 100 in 1 year or in the 2 years. Are you assuming this or that? How I'm gonna count students, right? If your program is an educational program and it's a 2-year period, what happened with my 3rd graders when they are in 4th grade? All those more detailed, specific questions would be addressed during the contract negotiation. And we will make sure, and this is very important for the data team, for the social analysis team that I represent gladly here with Ronnie. So as you know, you are serving here. This is where the piece of your puzzle happens, right? You serve a specific population, but we want to keep looking at the big community. We want to keep looking at the performance of the community. In this inner circle, there are many different puzzle pieces, right? Many different agencies. We will try to work as realistically and as strategically as possible to align measurements with agencies serving the same demographics. So during contract negotiation, you can expect from us to invite you to measure things the same way as other agencies are doing. Let's put an example. Homeless services, street outreach services for homeless population. Either you are serving youth or families or chronic and shelter or veterans. If your program is a street outreach, we would like you to use a metric description that's aligned with HAMIS, that is consistent with the other agencies providing the similar service, because that helps us to see if there is a larger impact. Same thing in educational programs. If there is a way to measure that it's transferable to other agencies, because it's one of the metrics that the Texas Education Agency uses in their school reports, or because it's a consolidated national standard to measure certain things, we kindly invite you to incorporate that to your scorecards. All that will happen during contract negotiation. So we are already building those collaboratives of agencies that are serving the same demographic and trying to build what's called shared measurement. That is the move that we are trying to push forward, and that will happen during contract negotiation. But what you have now in front of you is the task to define your program clearly, making sure that you are aligning your program. Let's go back to this slide that Ronnie explained to you. you have to do three things. One, identify which is the long-term outcome that better fits and better suits you, right? For one agency that's represented here today, transportation for older adults. This is your long-term outcome. Older adults are healthy, engaged, and independent. This is it. For another agency that's clearly meant to serve youth, children and youth are healthy, self, and resilient, college, career, and military readiness. Make sure that you identify clearly which is the long-term outcome and the priority area under which your program suits better. It might not be the perfect fit, because the beauty of this effort that the city does, putting funds out there, is that we serve things that we don't know in many cases, or we don't do, right? But the best suit possible. And then once you have done that, first and paramount, write down your program plan. Sit down, and probably you have it already written, because I can only imagine the work in the nonprofit sector, applying and reapplying for funds. Go back to those program descriptions, be specific, be clear, be concise. Make sure that you tell us, how do you plan to implement the program? How you have the expertise to do that properly? How do you expect to make a difference in the life of your clients? And while you write that program, your metrics will flow, because if you describe the program clearly, you will know more or less, with the capacity that you have, how many you can serve. You know the value that you are putting out there. How well are you serving those clients? Yeah. If it's transportation, I'm not giving them bikes. I'm putting them in a beautiful, nice van. This is a silly example, but the quality of your service, and then the impact in those individual lives. My seniors, my older adults are making their medical appointments because now they have a transportation service, and they are not overspending the money that they don't have to pay for taxis or Uber or whatever the transportation, the paid transportation is. So this is the task for you, and we kindly encourage you to make any additional questions if you have more now for us about metrics, performance measures, RBA, or ways to define your measurements. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you all for being here with us, especially the people who came in person, because it's very kind. No, I want to thank everybody from their homes, from your interest and for your willingness to help us fund valuable initiatives in the community. And everything will be posted online, as you know. All these resources will be available for you, and have a good day.